Mercedes drops a bombshell about Kimi Antonelli after his car's balance fell apart during the Dutch Grand Prix, giving Lando Norris the perfect opportunity to strike. Mercedes is now digging deep to understand exactly what went wrong with Kimi's W17. As the race progressed, the balance became increasingly difficult, with more and more oversteer appearing on every tyre set. While Kimi's pace began to fade, Norris immediately saw the opportunity, made his move, and went on to claim the Dutch GP victory. So, what actually happened to Kimi's pace at Zandvoort? Why couldn't Mercedes find an obvious explanation? And could this issue have a major impact on the championship fight heading into Monza? Let's break it all down. Let's rewind to Sunday afternoon at Zandvoort, because for a long stretch of this race, everything was going Mercedes' way. Kimi Antonelli took the lead early and controlled the Dutch Grand Prix through the first stint and deep into the second. He wasn't exactly cruising, though Lando Norris was right there in the McLaren, hunting him down lap after lap, never quite close enough to strike, but never far enough away to be ignored either. Then came the second round of pit stops. Antonelli came in, bolted on the hard tyre, and rejoined, still in control of the race. On paper, nothing had changed. In reality, everything was about to. Almost immediately, the balance of the W17 started shifting. Antonelli began reporting that the car simply didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't a single dramatic moment, no spin, no lockup, no visible error. It was something more frustrating, a slow, steady erosion of grip and confidence, lap by lap. Norris smelled the opportunity. As the pack caught up to lap traffic, he found Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari in his way and used it as a launch pad. Norris went around the outside of Antonelli, completing the move in dramatic fashion. Then picked off Hamilton shortly after to seize the race lead outright. Mercedes tried to respond. When the virtual safety car came out later in the race, the team pitted Antonelli again, hoping a fresh set of tyres might reset the balance and give him a shot at hitting back. On paper, this should have worked. A new set of tyres usually means new grip, a clean slate, and a real chance to close the gap back down. But it didn't happen that way. Even on the fresh rubber, Antonelli couldn't find a way past Norris. If anything, the pattern just repeated itself. The car felt fine for a lap or two, and then the same creeping oversteer crept back in. Norris, by contrast, looked completely comfortable out front, managing his pace and his tyres with total control. He cruised home to victory by 11.5 seconds, a comfortable, unchallenged win once he'd made that pass stick, with no late scare, no safety car drama, nothing to threaten the result in the closing laps. For Mercedes, it wasn't a race lost through strategy or a mistake. It wasn't lost in the pit lane, and it wasn't lost to a driver error either. It was a race lost to a car that quietly and inexplicably stopped cooperating right when it mattered most. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because normally, when a team loses pace like this, there's a reason. A wrong tyre choice, a setup compromise, damage, track temperature swings, something you can point to. This time, Mercedes has nothing. In the team's post-race debrief, trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin confirmed that fans had been asking exactly what happened to Antonelli's pace in that third stint and admitted the team is still trying to figure it out themselves. According to Shovlin, Antonelli described the balance getting progressively harder to manage as the race went on, with oversteer building on every fresh tyre set rather than easing off. That in itself isn't unheard of. Tyres degrade, balance shifts happen. But what makes this case unusual is what Mercedes says it did not do. Shovlin was clear that the team made no changes to the car during the race and made no adjustment to the aerodynamic balance, the kind of change that could realistically explain a shift like this. In other words, nothing on the setup side moved that should have caused Antonelli's oversteer to keep escalating. That's exactly why Mercedes has now opened a formal review. Shovlin confirmed the team is going through the data in detail, trying to trace the root cause before the next race weekend, because whatever caused this needs to be understood and, ideally, fixed before it can strike again. Was it a tyre-specific issue unique to that compound? A track surface effect at Zandvoort that exposed something in the car's characteristics? A subtle mechanical shift that wasn't picked up in real time? Right now, Mercedes genuinely doesn't know, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes this inspection so important. Think about it from an engineering standpoint for a second. When a car loses performance because of a setup call, that's frustrating, but it's manageable. You know what dial to turn back. When a car loses performance because of something you can't identify, that's a much bigger problem, because you have no guarantee it won't show up again at the very next race. That's the real reason Shovlin's comments carry so much weight here. This isn't just an explanation for the fans, it's a genuine internal red flag for Mercedes' engineering department. There's also a wider context worth mentioning. Antonelli is still a rookie by experience, if not by results, and part of what makes an issue like this tricky to diagnose is separating a genuine mechanical or aerodynamic problem from a driver simply working harder to manage a difficult set of tyres. Mercedes will be cross-checking data from Antonelli's car against sister car and historical references to see whether this was isolated to him specifically or something built into the car's characteristics that a more experienced driver might describe differently. Either way, it's now a priority item on the engineering to-do list before the cars roll out again. Zoom out, and the timing of this couldn't be more sensitive. Norris has now won back-to-back races. That's a serious run of form, and it's chipped away at what was once a much bigger championship gap. His deficit to standings leader Antonelli now sits at 83 points, still substantial, but shrinking at a moment when Mercedes can least afford it. To make matters more complicated, Antonelli is heading into his home race, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, already carrying bad news. Mercedes has confirmed he'll take a back-of-the-grid penalty there, tied to an engine change. So not only does Mercedes need to solve an unexplained balance issue, they need to do it while their championship leader starts from the very back of the grid at one of the most difficult circuits in the world to overtake at. It's not all bad news for the team though, despite not having the outright fastest car on the grid right now. Mercedes still walked away from Zandvoort with a strong overall haul. George Russell won the sprint race over the weekend, and then Russell and Antonelli combined for a double podium finish in the Grand Prix itself, meaning that even with Antonelli's late struggles, Mercedes still outscored every other team across the weekend. Looking ahead to Monza, the challenges are stacking up. Antonelli's grid penalty, an unresolved technical mystery on his car, and a red-hot Norris breathing down their neck in the standings. But Shovlin's message was one of controlled optimism: get the most out of the car, stay in the fight, and do everything possible to protect the lead in both championships. So that's where things stand heading into Monza, a mystery balance issue with no obvious cause, a championship lead that's no longer as comfortable as it looked a few weeks ago, and a home race for Antonelli that's already complicated by a grid penalty before a single lap is even driven. One thing's for sure, Mercedes has some serious homework to do before Monza, and how they answer it could shape the rest of this title fight. What do you think caused Antonelli's balance issue? Tyres, track surface, or something Mercedes hasn't spotted yet? Drop your theory in the comments, hit subscribe for more F1 breakdowns, and I'll see you in the next one.
Johnny Herbert has broken his silence and delivered a massive bombshell message to Mercedes over George Russell's recent dip in performance. According to Herbert, Mercedes' growing preference for Kimi Antonelli is putting even more pressure on Russell, especially as the young Italian continues to deliver stronger performances. And with Mercedes reportedly keeping an eye on Max Verstappen, the pressure on Russell is only getting bigger. The uncertainty over his future, combined with the threat of losing his seat, could be weighing heavily on the British driver, and Herbert believes this pressure may be starting to show on the track. So what exactly did Herbert say? How bad is the gap to Antonelli really? And what does the Verstappen rumor mean for Russell's long-term future at Mercedes? Stick around, because we're breaking down all of it in this video. Let's rewind for a second. When 2026 kicked off, George Russell wasn't just another driver on the grid. He walked into the season as the man many expected to finally step out of the shadows and fight for the championship. After years of being patient, of doing the steady professional job while others grabbed the headlines, this was supposed to be his moment. 11 races later, that story has taken a very different turn. Instead of leading the charge, Russell finds himself 69 points behind a gap that's roughly the equivalent of losing out on almost 3 race wins. And the driver responsible for that gap isn't some rival team's superstar. It's his own teammate, 19-year-old Kimi Antonelli. That's the part that stings the most. This isn't Russell losing ground to Verstappen or Norris out on track. This is a teammate battle, inside the same garage with the same car, and right now Russell is losing it. And that's what makes this situation so uncomfortable for Mercedes as a team. When a driver loses ground to a rival on another team, it's easy to explain away different cars, different philosophies, different resources. But when the gap opens up against your own teammate in identical machinery, there's nowhere to hide. Every data comparison, every qualifying session, every strategy call gets scrutinized side by side. There's no external excuse left to lean on. This is exactly where former fire steward Johnny Herbert stepped in with some brutally honest words. Speaking out recently, Herbert didn't hold back when describing just how one-sided this teammate battle has become. He explained that Antonelli's consistency is clearly getting to Russell, pointing out that almost every time the two get in the car, it's Antonelli coming out on top. Herbert did acknowledge that luck hasn't always been on Russell's side this year. What makes Herbert's comments even more pointed is the personal angle he added. He admitted that he, like so many others in the paddock, genuinely believed 2026 was going to be Russell's breakout year. Instead, it's turned into a season where his own teammate is outshining him race after race, and that kind of pressure doesn't just disappear when the summer break ends. But Herbert didn't stop at Antonelli. He went further, touching on a subject that's been quietly circling the paddock for months, the rumors linking Max Verstappen to a future move to Mercedes. Now, to be clear, nothing is confirmed. There's no signed contract, no official announcement. But rumors like this don't need to be true to have an effect, they just need to exist. And according to Herbert, that's exactly the problem. He believes the constant chatter around Verstappen potentially joining Mercedes down the line is doing real damage to Russell's mindset. Think about it from Russell's perspective. You're already fighting to stay ahead of a rookie teammate who's outperforming you. At the same time, you know that somewhere in the background, the most dominant driver of this era might be circling your seat. That's not just sporting pressure, that's the kind of psychological weight that can follow a driver from the paddock straight onto the track. Herbert summed it up simply. Russell will be fully aware that his seat is under threat, and when a driver starts racing with that thought in the back of his mind, it rarely helps performance. So here's the real question, is this pressure actually affecting Russell's driving? Herbert clearly thinks so. His